You're listening to the Small Business Talk podcast with Cathy Smith. Episode 17.
Small Business Talk is a podcast for business owners and entrepreneurs who want a better way to run their businesses without spending years doing it the hard way. Discover tips and techniques that you can use to take your business to the next level. Enjoy episodes with our guest experts along with deeper dives into tools and tips that you can use in your business. Learn about building your social media channels, how to get Google to love your website, developing a digital marketing strategy, and tools to make your life in business easier, plus much more. Whether you're a small business owner, a seasoned entrepreneur, or just beginning a business journey, Small Business Talk is hosted by Cathy Smith, who has run the same marketing agency for more than 17 years and helped hundreds of business owners achieve their marketing goals.
Welcome to Small Business Talk. Today, we are talking to David Pagotto, the founder and managing director of Six Gun. David is an SEO specialist. So welcome, David.
Thank you so much for having me, Cathy. It's an absolute pleasure.
Excellent. So SEO is something that's bandied around. So if we could maybe start with telling our audience what SEO actually stands for and what it really means.
Absolutely. So SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. And the entire philosophy behind search engine optimization is to be organically ranked in Google and other search engines ultimately. So let me give you an example. Let's say someone is looking for a hammer store and they're located in Melbourne, and they jump on Google and they type in buy hammer online and they click the enter button. The first results that are going to come up on Google usually are the Google ads, which are things that, small businesses pay for. And then immediately under the paid section is the organic section that is basically up for grabs with search engine optimization. And the goal would be to have your business ranking as high as possible organically, which would bring traffic to the website and subsequent sales. So to kind of make it as easy to understand as possible, SEO is all about those organic rankings being shown in Google for relevant searches and ultimately increasing your traffic to the website.
That makes it pretty clear. So for a small business, we know that advertising is expensive, particularly the AdWords style advertising. So if we want to rank for that hammer store, and we'd probably want to rank for it in WA and not in Melbourne, but that's okay. If we want to rank for the hammer store, what should we be looking at doing with that particular page or pages to bring that up?
Look, there's ultimately three buckets that we like to talk about that will drive SEO performance. And we can talk about them quite broadly. The first one would be architecture. And that's where a lot of the technical components sit. But ultimately, to kind of define that in a bit of a simplistic term, it's all of those things that start with things like the content management system that you use. Is it something like WordPress that's very user-friendly, or is it something that, was custom made? And there's things like duplicate titles and a lot of kind of technical problems. So the baseline in terms of the website content management system that you use is going to be a big part of architecture and how that works. Other things we look at in terms of the architecture bucket would be things like page speed, things like mobile usability, which is a really big factor these days in terms of conversion rates and also rankings as well. And then on a more technical level, things like title tags, meta descriptions, H1 tags, things like sitemaps, ultimately all of the fun tech stuff that sits on a website. The other two are a little bit easier to explain, and the other two are content that sits on the website and link building. So when it comes to content, having a healthy amount of content on the website is a good idea, particularly on the page that you'd like to rank for. So ideally, what would happen in the event of an e-commerce site that is selling hardware and hammers and things like that? They would probably have a category page that lists the various hammers that they sell. And that's probably the page that you try to rank for a keyword like buy hammers online. Now, on that particular page, you'd ideally want to have a substantial block of content, which kind of dives into what the page is about, the various hammers that they sell, why they're better, where they're made, what the specifications are, all of that kind of fun information so that people know that they're kind of in the right place and that side of things. We also look at things like if the content's duplicate or not, ensuring that the content is unique from any other page on their website and any other page that exists on the internet as a whole. So focusing on content is definitely a big piece of the puzzle. And then the other part of the puzzle would be the link building side of things. So links essentially act as votes. And the more links you have, obviously there's a quality component to consider as well, quality and relevancy. But to keep it simple, getting backlinks back to that particular page will be valuable and useful in ranking that page as well. So to kind of sum that up in terms of what the buckets generally are, it's considering the architecture of the page, ensuring that you've got the right content management system, things like page speed is working well, things like mobile usability is working well, and some of the more technical elements, things like H1 tags and title tags are working well within the site. Ensuring that there is enough content on that particular page to rank, ensuring that it's unique. So in relation to the link building, just ensuring that you have a process in place to build links to that particular page that you'd like to rank for is another piece of the puzzle as well. So holistically, they're the three main things that we look at. Obviously, we can dive very deeply into each of those things in terms of specific tactics, and we may get into a few of those things in this call. But they're essentially the three things that a small business person needs to kind of wrap their head around, have a little bit of understanding in, and apply what they can to their own website.
Okay, so that all sounds great. So how about we split those up a little bit for our audience, especially things like H1 tags, because not everybody's going to realise that's a heading one. So if we start with the sort of architecture of the page, now you're saying a healthy amount of content. Are we looking at 300 words, 500 words, 1,000 words? Because we know certainly in the last little while that people are going for very minimalistic designs, which look great. But of course, Google don't love them because they don't really realise whether you're selling a hammer or a bucket of cement or maybe not even anything to do with hardware. So maybe if we can just talk a little bit about the healthy content, the actual amount of things that we need. So we need our keywords in our titles, in our descriptions. If you can maybe explain to the audience a little bit about what meta descriptions are and a few of those terms you used.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so I'll start with the content in terms of the length side of things. So as an SEO person, my goal is really to get clients to use as much content as possible. I mean, there is a strong relationship between long-form content and ranking performance that's fairly established. So from an SEO perspective, and often I say this to clients, my goal is to kind of get the most content on the page as possible. And where design comes into it, there's a lot of ways to design content into a page so you still have that sleek design, but you have content on that page as well. I mean, I'm often having the conversation with clients where they want that minimalistic design. I'm sure you've had a lot of those conversations in the past as well. It's a pretty common kind of conversation to be having.
Absolutely.
There's no reason that you can't kind of marry the two together, have great design and have great content on page. In terms of the lengths that we speak about, it is dependent on the type of page. So where we're looking at category pages in an e-commerce store, that can be a shorter amount of content than, say, a service page on a website. So let's bring it back to our example for a hardware store, an online hardware store. That category page for hammers, you could realistically have somewhere between that 200 and 300 words would be absolutely fine. But if we're talking about a page that is, let's say there is a tradie, a builder in WA, and they have a service page where they're targeting deck installations or something like that, obviously using the hammers that we're speaking about, we would probably suggest somewhere closer to the 500 word mark for a page like that as a minimum.
Excellent. So, that's one of the conversations that we always end up with is how do we get that minimalistic design with all those words on the page? And like you say, you push them further down the page and split them up with text, with images and other things so that can be the best of both worlds to get that nice, clean view, but with the information on the page so that Google can find you. So that's great. So maybe if you could then go on to talk about the headings and the meta descriptions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. So I mentioned the term H1 tag, and as you pointed out, it refers to the heading 1 tag. And essentially, when it comes to content, there's multiple headings that you can select. If we use the example of WordPress, for example, or really anything, you should have the option within the WYSIWYG editor to select a H1 tag, a H2 tag, a H3 tag, all the way down to H6, which basically indicates, heading 1 being the main heading, heading 2 being a subheading, heading 3 being like a further subheading. And essentially, when we talk about the H1 tag or H2 tags or whatever it is from an SEO perspective, the H1 tag is being that main tag on a page. We want to make sure that it aligns somewhat to the title tag that we're using. which is section, like if you load a page in a web browser and then hover over that particular tab, you'll see what the page title is. And essentially from an SEO perspective, ideally you want to have a single H1 tag per page. You don't want to be in a situation where you're not using a H1 tag because you're leaving some opportunity on the table. And you don't want to be in a situation where you're using multiple H1 tags because you're kind of muddying the waters in terms of that main kind of message and essentially keywords that you want to use. I mean, it's been more of a historical type of guideline to use a single H1 tag. Google's kind of lessening their stance on it in more recent times, but it's still a good recommendation to kind of stand by to have a single H1 tag and ensure that the keywords are infused in that H1 tag in a way that's still engaging and users understand and doesn't come across as over-optimized as well.
I think that's a great idea because, if you start using too many H1 tags, then it does get confusing not only for Google but also for the viewer to what you're actually talking about. So what about your lower hierarchy? So your H2s down to 6, so your heading 2 down to 6. Is there any limit on those, and should you be using all 6, or is it fine just to use one H1 and then several H2s and possibly a H3?
Generally, the length of content that we're generally writing for clients, we get up to the kind of H2 and H3 level. You'd have to be writing some really deep content that has multiple subheadings with subheadings under those subheadings multiple times to get down to a H6 level. I don't think I've ever used a H6 or a H5 in my entire life. I may have used the occasional H4 maybe.
You'd be writing a book.
So I think you kind of stick to the general guidance of your one H1. It's totally okay to have multiple H2 tags as the secondary headings. And then, for example, if you need to do headings under those H2 headings, you can use H3 type of headings under those. So usually that kind of a hierarchy is totally fine. And then, you don't need to really worry about going any deeper. And it's totally fine to have multiple H2s, totally fine to have multiple H3s as falls into the hierarchy of the page. Like if you have a long form piece of blog content that's that 2,000, 3,000 word type of piece, then you're probably talking about having H2s and H3s.
Excellent. So you've spoken about meta tags, and I know there's a lot of debate about whether Google's actually reading meta tags anymore. Obviously, It's a very good thing for the viewer to be able to see what the page is about. So can you speak on that, to what meta tags actually are and whether Google's still reading them or not?
Yeah, sure. In the search results page, when you type in a particular query, the kind of headings that you see for each listing is essentially the title tag. And then under that, the little bit of a blurb is the meta description. Now, Google depreciated the SEO value ultimately of meta keywords and meta descriptions back in 2009. And that was something that they kind of put out there from their side. But something to remember about the meta description is that it has the ability to increase the click-through rate of that particular search result, which has an indirect result on performance ultimately. So even though jamming a bunch of keywords into the meta description, like that isn't going to get you an increase in ranking performance, but writing a meta description well to get people to click onto the website and engage with the website and not click the back button, that will have an indirect ranking performance increase type of result. So it's still important to write strong meta descriptions, but instead of focusing on jamming keywords in from Google will rank it because the keywords are in there. No, they will rank you better if you're able to get a high click-through rate with less people clicking that back button. So writing a meta description that aligns exactly, sends people to exactly what they're looking for, and they're not clicking that back button, that is definitely an indirect performance type of task, ultimately.
Perfect. So writing a meta description that's human-friendly will help with your SEO because it'll send traffic, and of course traffic's one of the indicators for Google in around SEO. Okay, so that's great. So what about backlinks? We get a million different emails every day from all sorts of companies all over the world saying, I can get you on page 1, you don't have to pay, you're going to be fabulous, the whole bit here, as no doubt your customers do too. One, obviously, we don't want to be in contact with those kind of people. So maybe you could tell us that the right way to do backlinks.
Yeah. I mean, backlinks, it's one of those things that I would say in the SEO industry, it's the greyest area. It's also the hardest thing to scale. It's quite a tricky beast. But from a small business perspective, there's some things you can really easily grab a hold of there that is going to get you some really good performance. And it's totally within your hands to do it. You don't have to engage an agency to do this kind of thing if you've got the time and capacity to kind of feel it out. So the first thing that we recommend to our clients is to leverage their existing relationships. Now, pretty much every business out there has dealers, suppliers, friends, associations, sponsorships. There's all of these things that they have. They probably haven't thought about how to use from an SEO perspective. And even being let's say our hammer store example, you're buying those hammers from somewhere, a wholesaler, a distributor in Australia, they probably have like a dealer's page on their website where they can link to you if you asked for that. And often those dealer pages aren't updated for 5 years at a time until someone reaches out and say, hey, can you add us to this page? We're one of your dealers. Like, we sell your products, add us there. So leveraging your connections is probably one of the fastest, most simplistic ways to kind of build some really high quality relevant backlinks. It doesn't get any more natural and it doesn't get any easier than going down that path as one of the things to look at. It is fantastic. Something else that we recommend to small businesses, and this plays on with the PR angle as well, so it can help the PR side of things as well as SEO, is to look at services, and they're free services or websites, platforms, one being named SourceBottle and another being named Haro, which is Help a Reporter Out. I'm not sure if you're familiar with these platforms at all, or if you've come across them.
Yes, I am. Yeah. So if you can just explain to the audience what they actually are and how they work.
Ultimately, they're platforms where journalists out there ultimately request people that fall into a particular category that can kind of almost add a little bit of commentary around a particular question. So journalists might need someone in the fashion space to talk about the 2019 trends for winter or something like that. And equally, a journalist might need a small business owner that has recently discovered digital marketing and some of the tips they've used. Or it's so broad in terms of what's out there, and there's so much of it. Like, it's, every day, I don't know, you would get the SourceBottle emails. It's
multiple.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that journalists rely on these kind of things quite a bit once you kind of dive into it. But it gives small business owners the opportunity to kind of put their hand up. And there's a lot of requests for small businesses in particular to kind of chime in around various things, to kind of get that backlink, to get a little bit of PR in a very natural, honest way as well. So I would say that is, in terms of a link building strategy and a little bit of a PR strategy, that's something that we definitely recommend to all of our clients to kind of engage with, have a bit of a play around with, dive into it. It can take a while to get the right flow of how to reply to kind of get a response and get published. But I think as far as building backlinks and getting a little bit of PR, it is a really good thing. You don't need to engage a PR agency and spend thousands of dollars monthly to kind of get some of this basic stuff happening and get a grasp of how that world works.
Excellent. So obviously we're not buying backlinks and we're not buying these ones that we get emails from all the time about spammy ones and end up in pornographic sites. So What's your word of warning about buying backlinks?
Look, those type of backlinks where people are reaching out to you and it's kind of framed up as, we'll give you, 100 backlinks or 1,000 backlinks for like this really cheap price, that is always an absolute no-go. You have to understand that with SEO, it's not just a matter of doing things that can increase performance. You can also do a lot of things that cause harm. So it's all about the quality of the vote. It's all about the quality of the backlink and the relevancy of the backlink. Getting those kind of really cheap mass backlinks for your website is just shooting yourself in the foot.
Absolutely. And like you say, when Google finds out about it, you're going to be penalised, and quite often it can take you years to recover from those penalties. So that quick fix is definitely not worth it. And the quality and the subjects of those sites are probably not something you want to be associating your business with anyway. Okay, so what about reciprocal links? It used to be quite a common thing for, like you say, if you were putting it on a dealer's site, then you would then send back to the dealer, or like yourself, you might put it on a client site and then get them to link with you. I know Google's cracked down on that quite a bit as well. So can you talk about on reciprocal links, please?
Yeah, from the small business perspective or from the business owner perspective, the idea would be to get backlinks to your site where you don't have to provide reciprocal links. If you do have to provide reciprocal links, you can do so with a no-follow attribute. So essentially, you might be linking back to them in a way that a user can navigate where it makes sense. So for example, the hammer store that stocks a particular brand of hammer might link to that on their suppliers page in terms of like who they're dealing with, and then the Hammer store links back to them. That's a very natural relationship in terms of how that would work. That's not the kind of relationship where there's kind of dodgy deals happening under tables. That's a very natural reciprocal link that can occur. And even if it wasn't nofollow, and we'll dive into what that is and how that works a little bit later, that would be an acceptable kind of way to do it. But the ideal situation so that you as a business owner harness as much value as possible from that particular link is to have it as a one-way link. So something that I do personally is I have a particular page set up on my website for all of the media that we get. So if you click on our media page, there's like a list of all the media that we get with links going out to that media. Now, obviously that media links back to us, and the way that we link back to it is through a nofollow attribute. Now, a nofollow attribute ultimately tells Google and other crawlers that there's no SEO value in that link essentially going back to them. So we're getting a follow link from them most of the time. They're basically saying, yep, we're happy to kind of pass the value of our website onto there. We're happy to kind of stand behind it. They're a great site. We're linking to it. And then from my perspective, I'm saying our editorial system is to kind of have nofollow links to all outbound sites because we want to ultimately harness as much value as we can internally. So from a small business perspective, when it comes to reciprocal links, the best situation is not to find yourself in a situation where you have to give them back if you can. If you do want to from a, where it makes sense to kind of link back to something, the preference would be to use a nofollow attribute. So you're harnessing the power and you're not, sending it back out. But you have to remember, in the world of what's natural, sometimes sending someone linking to you and you linking back to them can be a totally natural thing as well. So there's kind of like a hierarchy of what you'd want. First, you'd try to get a one-way link. Secondly, you might try and do a no-follow return link if a return link's kind of an expected piece of the puzzle. If it's a supplier and you have a relationship with them and there's kind of an expectation that they get a link. But then ultimately as well, where they're kind of savvy and they want a link back for whatever reason, there's a purpose that can be natural as well. So I wouldn't be too concerned about guarding it so tightly that it never happens. But ideally, you would push for one-way links. So you're receiving links without sending links back out ultimately.
Okay, so if you had to send a link back, would you then pick a different page on their website as opposed to their homepage? So obviously, if there was a supplier's page, that might make sense depending on what you were doing, or you might send it to the particular style of product that you're selling, something like that. Would that work better?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about what's relevant. Google has manual reviewers that look into this kind of thing, and you certainly wouldn't get a manual penalty for doing a single reciprocal link. But ultimately, what it comes down to is the way the links are set up. Is it natural or is it unnatural? The most natural way of doing it is to send the user somewhere with the most value. So like you pointed out, it might not be to the homepage, it might be to an individual page on that website. And same with them linking to you. Like they might link to you in a way where they're sending people to the category of their particular product, for example, and then you're linking back to their, about us page where they're talking about their 10-year warranty that you like really talk about in your, in your spiel about them as a business. So all of that kind of factors into how natural it would appear. And it's usually like these things are picked up as a negative when they're done at like a really big scale. So when someone's trying to game the system and they do 100, 200, 1,000 kind of reciprocal links with people that there's no relevancy between the business and it's just like clearly done for SEO purposes, that's when you're getting into an area of major problems. But where you're talking about it on a legitimate kind of a level, there wouldn't really be any problems with that, however the reciprocal linking would be done. But in the best interest of the business, it's better to kind of harness that authority rather than kind of link back out.
Okay, cool. So if you were doing a very high volume linking strategy, you'd obviously spread that out over time. You wouldn't want to do 100 or 200 links per day. You'd be better off doing 20 or 30 each day over several weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a very challenging process to get something like 20 or 30 links a day, even with a massive budget and a massive amount of resources. To get 20 or 30 legitimate links a day would be a massive job, massive. What you'd aim for, from an SEO perspective for a small business is probably you might start to get 1 or 2 links a week. That's probably where you're kind of beginning. Because even when you're asking people that you're friends with and there's relationships, takes them a long time to get around to it. They're busy. The website, the IT guy updates it every quarter. So, it's in the queue for that. So in terms of velocity, in terms of how often you should be building links and what that kind of looks like and what it looks like over time, ideally, it's one of those strategies that you want to kind of put in place and work on regularly. You want to put some regular time aside to do it, whether it be, an hour or two a week where you jump on the computer and you send out some emails and you do some stuff with Source Bottle and you reach out to some industry blogs and kind of offer to be a contributor so you can do some stuff there. And, there's a few different ways to kind of grease the gears a little bit.
Excellent. So basically anywhere you see people offering high volume, sort of anything like 20, 30, 100, 200 a week, that's obviously a red flag. So the SEO is a long game. It's not a quick fix, and you need to work on building those relationships, because basically that's what Google's looking at. It is actually a relationship and that is relevant for their viewers. So if you've got a situation where you're new to the online space or you're a new business, you've got a relatively new or a brand new domain name, can you give our audience a couple of tips on what they might do with a new domain name? Because obviously Google likes old domain names because they've been around a while. So if you've got someone who's just new to online or new to that domain.
Yeah. The first thing to kind of consider when it comes to getting started would probably be the competition in terms of what you're going after. So if you're a local tradie, let's say you're a plumber that's targeting a particular suburb in Perth, or around the Perth area, that is a much easier target to break into than if you're selling hammers online and you're targeting essentially, a national market. So the first thing to consider would be competition. If the competition is relatively low in what's the suburb around Perth?
Yeah, you could say Fremantle or Kwinana, Rockingham, any of those.
One of those, right? If you had that and then plumber after that, except for obviously the major centres, Perth would be much harder. And probably Fremantle would be harder. But if the local suburb type of terms, starting off with a new domain's fine, because the reality is that those suburbs and surrounding suburbs, there might be 10 or so plumbers. There might even be more plumbers that service that area. But the reality is there's very few plumbers that are engaging in SEO in any kind of real way, that have a website that has a little bit of oomph there. So you're in a good space to kind of, get some traction reasonably fast. Whereas if you're trying to start a business that is targeting a national audience, and you have to probably have a little bit of plan, a bit of a budget around attacking SEO over a long term and have a bit more of a realistic goal. But for someone that's starting a brand new site, other than kind of assessing the competition and seeing where that's at, it's realistically about nailing the basics, making sure that the architecture is right, making sure that the content's there, making sure that you have time allocated for the link building side of things. SEO is one of those things that you definitely have to chip away at, especially if you're going to take it on as the business owner, learn about it, execute on it. There's a lot of technical bits and pieces to learn and know. But I would say it's one of the most valuable things, learning about digital marketing as a whole, including SEO and Google Ads and a bit of social media and content marketing. In this day and age is one of the most valuable things for a small business owner to kind of know and learn and be interested in. I think gone are the days where people flip open the yellow pages and kind of pick up the phone and ring someone. I mean, don't get me wrong, my grandparents are probably still doing that exact thing, but it's not what the majority of people are doing. Getting your hands on digital marketing and understanding a bit of it is super valuable. And I think just dedicating the time to learn it. Get in there, put some hours every week aside to kind of do a bit of learning and implement a few things on your website. And yeah, SEO is definitely a long game. So know that you're going to be doing things ultimately forever. It never really ends.
Excellent. So obviously organic is the end game and where you want to go. So in that situation where you've got a new domain, you may need to look at doing a little bit of paid advertising to just encourage Google to send you that traffic.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big fan of SEO. I think it's an asset to a business. It sticks around after it's done. There are a lot of good things that come from it. But the negative is that it's a really slow-moving beast. Whereas ads, you can set up and you can have them running instantly and they can provide instant performance. But the negative is obviously, the cost is always there. And as soon as you turn off the budget, everything comes to a grinding halt. But the reality is most of the clients that we work with do a combination of these things. We don't live in a world where most marketing strategies are to use the smartest and best parts of each channel. It's no longer about let's just do SEO. It's like, well, you're probably leaving a lot on the table with Google Ads and social and content and using a bit of LinkedIn in the B2B space. There's so many ways to kind of drive a business forward in the marketing space. And to be reliant solely on SEO isn't a strong way to go either, because, Google can change things and suddenly you're ranking high, now you're ranking low, and you don't want to be reliant on one channel is what I'm saying. So you kind of want to have your referral kind of network set up, and you want to do a bit of SEO, and you want to be doing a little bit of ads, and you want to be on social, and you want to be, the idea would be to kind of do the best, use each channel as effectively as possible, picking out the best parts from each. So something that we often do for clients is use the paid side of things for remarketing. We drive a lot of traffic there with SEO. They're paying for that in terms of our service, but we want to, really embed the brand in their mind. So we'll use the remarketing functions of paid to really drill that in, which can be a really effective thing to do. And then in other strategies, we're more geared to Google Ads and that side of things because they're looking for faster results, and SEO can really deliver. So people need to kind of open their mind to, very rarely is it about doing one channel awesomely and just neglecting the rest. So you've got to have a presence across channels to some degree.
That is fantastic, David. Well, I could definitely pick your brains and geek out all day on this, but we're up to our final 5. We have 5 quick questions that I ask all my guests. So are you game?
I'm absolutely game. Bring it on.
Okay. So what is the best advice given to you by a mentor?
It probably comes down to marketing. It's not just about getting the lead. That's like the front end of marketing. It's also about, once they've in your funnel, they've become a lead, it's also about providing that experience before they become a client. So it's like how the proposal is kind of presented, how all of that back end is just as important, if not more important than the front end. Don't focus just on lead acquisition. Focus on the system from turning a lead into a client, because that side of things is more important.
I think that's very relevant, because people go out and they spend all this money on marketing and then they forget to have the systems to back it up to then push it into a sale. And of course, once the person becomes a sale, you've got to remember that they are actually a person and you need to treat them that way. So that's brilliant. Okay, what is the biggest help you have received since starting your own business?
I have a partner, my lovely girlfriend, who's a writer, and I lean on her for so much writing help. She is amazing. So I would say that she is just, I lean on her way too much. I'd say that she gives me writing help at least once or twice a week.
Excellent. Well, writers are very difficult to come by, and especially good ones. So hang on to her. Maybe you better make her more than just your girlfriend. Yeah. But that's another story. We'll leave that one alone. Okay. What is the one thing that you have to do every day, your non-negotiable?
I think, and this ties into what we talked about, I've got in my calendar at 8:00 every morning, I go through all the Haro and Source Bottle emails, and anything that relates to us as a business, I'm onto like a whip. Every day I'm just sending out these requests for PR. We're super hungry. So I'd say at the moment, that is top of mind. That is an unbreakable thing in my calendar at the moment. Excellent.
What is your favorite business book and why?
I would say 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. I started this agency because I fell in love with the win-win philosophy. And I often quote that to prospects and clients, and anyone that's read the book, they're just like, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I love it, because most agencies aren't built on a win-win type of model where it's like, we want the clients to win, we want the staff to win, we want the business to win. All the agencies I've worked with in the past, it's usually about the business winning. The staff are usually not really winning. The clients usually aren't winning. It's not a very win-win situation. So we try to build those win-win situations so that it's just an awesome kind of dynamic. So I would say that is the number one book.
And I think that's really critical, especially in the SEO space. It has such a bad rep of people just taking your money and you never being able to see any results or where it's going. So that's definitely going to set you right apart in the market. So well done. Okay, our final question is, what do you wish you had known when you started your business?
Probably something that I fall into this trap. I see people fall into this trap all the time, and I even have to pull myself out of this trap now a little bit, is some things I get, like often I can be a perfectionist around really minor things. And the reality is, your logo, the way your website looks for the most part is largely irrelevant. Like if I look at how much I toiled over some of this minor stuff that has absolutely no business impact, sometimes 95% is good enough. You don't have to go to 100% and spend an extra 4 weeks thinking about it and toiling it over it and getting everything 100%. I think understanding where to put energy rather than trying to be a perfectionist across the board is the key, because you can spend an unlimited amount of resource and time on things that don't have business impact. And when you're at the start of your business, it becomes very clear that those resources, in terms of your time, is very valuable to get the traction that you want.
Absolutely. Brooke Castillo from the Life Coach School talks about a B-. She says it's better to get it out there and be a B- rather than sit on it all day waiting for it to be the perfect A, because then you can't help anybody. So get it out there, tweak it, then perfect it, and go from there. So, sometimes our B- work is the stuff that makes the most difference to our customers. Excellent, David. Well, like I say, I could pick your brains forever. I've very much enjoyed our chat and hope you've done the same. So if our SPT audience would like to get a credible SEO person and an SEO agency, how can they find more about yourself and Six Guns?
They can go to our website, sixgun.com.au. If any of your audience would love a little bit more information, we're happy to kind of, go through their website, no obligations, free of charge, and kind of give them some pointers and some help. And we're kind of available on social media, LinkedIn, all of that kind of stuff as well, that will probably be in the show notes, I imagine.
Definitely. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, David. Appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Cathy. It's been a real pleasure.
Don't forget to subscribe to Small Business Talk podcast and head on over to smallbusinestalk.com.au/downloads for all the show notes and links to this episode. Remember, to be great, you must start. Pick one tip from today's episode, take action and implement it. Let's meet again next week at the same time and place. Until then, take action. And SPT community, enjoy your journey.